Well, Islam is painted incorrectly in the media here. People consider Islam just another set of beliefs. And if you're argumentative against Muslims, then it's the same thing as being argumentative against Buddhists, against Taoists, against postmodernists, what have you. But the issue is that Islam is more than just a set of beliefs. Islam is a political state. Yes, it's a set of beliefs, but it's also a political state. It's also a cultural identity. There's so much to Islam that we would be committing folly if we just considered it to be a set of beliefs. So what we should know about Islam is that there was a state establishment with Islam which has rules of how to live. Laws in Islam and repercussions in Islam are very different from how we handle things in the West. A lot of the repercussions for crimes committed, or what might not even be considered crimes in the West, is just violence. And this is something that penetrates past simple beliefs into the way the world should work, according to the vast majority of Muslims. So we have to understand Islam is not just a set of beliefs. It's always been a state as well as a cultural identity. And so Islam is growing here, and it's not by conversion. It's not by conversion. A statistic that I've heard repeated often is that 30,000 people a year in the West become Muslim. And though that might be true, another statistic shows that 20,000 of them revert back to their former religion within a year or two. So we don't have those high staggering numbers of conversions that people would say. Really, it's birth rates. And the birth rates of Muslims throughout the world far exceeds the birth rates of Westerners. And so Islam is growing in population, is gaining a foothold, and we see the governments and locales where these Muslims are getting more of the population. We see them creating laws specially designed to appease Muslims. Fact has been traded for fancy here in the West. A lot of what used to be considered important, such as truth and history, is no longer important. Now everything seems to be chasing after personal freedoms, personal rights. And what was once considered virtue is now not. So before, in the past, it used to be, well, let's follow after the truth. And if you're right about what you think, then I'll listen to you. And if I'm right about what I think and I can show you that, then you listen to me. But that's gone now. And now it's a matter of, well, as long as you're happy and not hurting anyone, what's true for you is true for you, and what's true for me is true for me. Mm-hmm. And so when people start arguing against Islam, other people take that to be an argument against a people group who's not doing anything, mm-hmm. and it's just we're arguing against their beliefs. But like I said, it's not just their beliefs. It's a state. It's a way of it's a set of laws, Sharia law, that is oppressive, that is being argued against. And so if I'm to say that's wrong, that goes against everything the West teaches now. Now the West is teaching there is no right and wrong. It's whatever's true for you is true for you. And so there's this politically correct mentality that's set up. Don't say anything bad about those people. They're people just like you are. They're just as right as you are. Don't say anything bad. You're intolerant if you say something bad. And that's how we have this politically correct mindset come about. In Islam, if you leave Islam, you can be punished with death. Is this right? If you disagree with the religion into which you are born, should you not have the freedom to live in disagreement? I think so. But if I say something about Islam, saying Islam is wrong for mandating death to apostates, now I'm not being politically correct. Now I'm not saying what's true for you is true. So now I'm standing up and I'm trying to stand for virtue and what's right, and yet this is all of a sudden something that's seen negatively by Western culture, and it's not wise. It will bring about the demise of us all. I think the term that's being used for it, if not, I'd like to propagate it some more, but the term that I've heard used for it is terminal niceness. We're being so nice and politically correct to things that are willing to rip us apart that it will be the end of us.
Being politically correct is to show disrespect to a Middle Easterner.
And it's to show lack of backbone. Muslims also believe, and this is why I love discussing with Muslims, they also believe there is a truth. They believe in the absolute truth of reality. There is some truth that we can reach, and we can find it if we look for it. And so for us to simply bow and let political correctness take over, that's more of this postmodern mindset where there is no truth. That's where that finds its foundation, and they don't think that. generally speaking, Muslims in the Middle East. Now you have, of course, Muslims in the West who are being affected by this postmodern cultural shift. But I'm talking in general. Muslims want to find the truth just as much as any Christian does. And so to come to them with this kind of conciliatory approach, which says, we can, at the end of the day, we can just both be happy together.
Can't we just get along?
Yeah, that's that is not something they respect, and quite frankly, neither do I.
So when Islam says it's a religion of peace, when Muslims say that Islam is a religion of peace, what does that mean? How does that reconcile with all the violence we're seeing on television?
That's an excellent question, Mike, and it takes some depth to get into it. Now, I do want to start off by saying Muslims are not the same thing as Islam. Now, Islam is the concept of the state, the way a state works. Islam is the religion. Islam is many, many things, but the Muslims are the people who adhere to that. And in no way, shape, or form can any Christian ever justify doing any sort of harm, physical harm, or have any sort of hatred against Muslims. They are our neighbors. They are, if we're the Jews, there's the Samaritans. You know what I'm saying? These are the people we're supposed to reach out to. These are our neighbors, and we're supposed to love our enemies, as Jesus says. To hate our enemies is the way of non-Christians. Mm-hmm. They will know us by our love. And so I want to emphasize that very clearly. Do not hate Muslims. Hate Islam all you want, but don't hate Muslims. So why the disconnect? Why the disconnect between Islam and what it teaches and Muslims and what they practice? And can we trust all Muslims? What about these radical Muslims? What's going on there? It seems Islam is very, very dichotomous in its history. The very early beginning parts of Islam, you have peace preached. Muhammad, in the first 10 years when he was preaching in Mecca, he's very, very peaceful. He's teaching almsgiving to widows and to the orphans. He's teaching monotheism. He's teaching social welfare and reform, peace. He's saying Jews and Christians and Sabians and anyone who believes in God in the last day and does good works, they can all go to heaven. These are the kinds of teachings we see in early Islamic history. Then when Muhammad leaves Mecca, goes to Medina, we see him now taking on the role of basically judge and governor of a city. And so now we see an army in general, I guess. And now we see an army being built up, and he starts launching raids against the Meccans, the place where he had just come from. And so now we see violence enter into the system. And slowly he starts getting angrier and angrier at the Jews, and he expels the 3 tribes of Jews who live in his city. And so we see statements come about which are not so friendly to Jews, statements such as, if you're going to take friends from among the people of the book, make them be the Christians, because there's Christians, from among the Christians you'll find honorable people. And so these are statements we find in the Quran now. It's a total shift from what was before. And then when he comes back to Mecca at the end of his life, now you have a conquering hero who's able to say whatever he wants and do whatever he wants. He's got such a large number of people underneath him in such a large area that he can teach and do whatever he wants. And so the message changes yet again. And now it's go and fight those who believe not in Allah from among the people of the book until they pay the tax with willing submission and feel themselves subdued. Now it's a matter of go, fight Jews and Christians until they've come subdued under Islam. And that's the Quran, chapter 9, verse 29. You have these shifts. And so Muslims in the West who want to focus on the peaceful messages can do that by referring to the early sections of the Quran, by referring to the early hadith. And the ones who want to be violent can focus on the latter ones. And unfortunately, I think the ones who are justified in their approach are the ones who are teaching violence, because they're going with Muhammad's final marching orders. They're going with the last things Muhammad says to do. I think it's an unfortunate truth that the Muslims who are right in following Islam are the ones who are violent. I wish that they would remain in the extreme minority. I wish that no one will take Islam seriously and that they'll all remain peaceful. But this explains why we have such a diversity in the application of Islam. Well, there's a faction of Islam called the Salafis, and the Salaf refers to the first 3 generations of Islam. And Muhammad said that if you're going to follow anyone or learn from anyone, learn from the Salaf, according to Ahadith. And the Salafis, That's one group. And then the Wahhabis, who also follow the most strictly to the Quran and to the Hadith. And it just happens to be that the people who follow Muhammad in the first 3 generations and the Quran and the Hadith the most strictly, those are the most violent.